Hey all, Steve Kolock here. I'm a senior front-end engineer with most of my experience in React, in particular for e-commerce, accessibility, and search engine optimization. I work a 9 to 5 and I'm on the journey to build a side project into a side business. I talk about programming, making product decisions, and more. Like and subscribe to get updates and learn how I'm making tech, marketing, and product decisions for my side projects. And comment below too to let me know if there's anything that you want me to cover, any questions you have that I might know the answer to or that you want me to dig into. All right, so really quickly, I'm just going to go through the animations that I use for the bingo board. So when you come to the page, you're logged in, you can click on bingo, and then click to create a game. So the initial animation when the bingo board is loaded is pretty much out of the box Svelte with a few different changes. Basically me playing around with the easing functions and then also taking into account that the board is set up like a grid. All right, so we're going to make this full screen to make it a little bit clearer. You can see the animation for the board when it comes up. It goes from top left to bottom right. And the way that we do that, the way that we accomplish that, is actually using just a really simple sort of loop iteration. And I'll show you how that's set up. And then also just one singular line which pulls in the native easing and transition capabilities that Svelte has to give us an optimized animation. So we pull in scale, which comes with Svelte natively. We pull in back in out. We have different options. So actually if I hover over scale, it'll show me that we're able to configure a delay, duration, easing, start, and opacity. And I use almost all of those. I don't use start in this case. And likewise for different sorts of transitions, you'd have different options. But we choose to make a duration of 500 milliseconds, so half a second, a delay of 25 milliseconds times 1 plus the x value plus the y value. So for example, in order to get our top left to bottom right staggered effect, my 0, 0 is just going to be 1 plus 0 times 25 milliseconds for the delay. And my 1, 0 is going to be 1 plus 1 plus 0, so 50 milliseconds of delay. So then, by the end, you're looking at 4 because we're using a 0 index. So the bottom right corner, this one, will have a 4 plus 4 plus 1, so 9 times 25 millisecond delay, which, that's 225. That kind of gives us that staggered effect. Now, all we're doing, like I said, is pulling in capabilities that we get from Svelte itself. So scale comes from the Svelte transition package, and there are a whole host of them. Fly is another one. You go to the tutorial, and then if you go down to transitions, so motion has tweened and spring, which I'm not going to go into here, but and then transitions, a lot of the different options here. So then if I were to import fade from Svelte transition, if we actually use, I think we're doing out, right? Transition fade. So this is actually not going to be just in or not just out, it's the full transition. And then you could potentially put in more information about the kind of easing, etc. that you want. But here we're just saying transition fade, and we're getting that effect. So Svelte provides that out of the box, which makes things really easy and pretty intuitive as well. So if you do want to see more about different motion and easing, there's also the opportunity to play around with this examples of easing, and you'll be able to see ease in, ease out, different durations, and the ways that you can modify whatever you're working on to give it a little bit more, kind of like a feeling of interactivity, make it a little bit more interesting and engaging. So you can see you've got all these different sorts of motions that you're able to take advantage of. Not everything maps directly from tweened, from like Svelte motion and Svelte transition, but they're very similar in a lot of ways in that there are different methods you can use to produce motion. So now going back to how I've incorporated it. So the way that I'm setting this up is basically a graph, so that even though this is an empty graph, it's kind of providing us the framework. Because this is a bingo board, you can only have certain values in certain columns. Now, each of these represents a row. So we have to do things a little bit differently. I found it easier to just segment all of my setup where I had all my zeros, so everything that could be in my column B for bingo, all my ones, everything for column I, twos is N, threes is G, O's is fours is O, and then I just iterate through the loop and I just push a row with each of those numbers here. So that means we basically have coordinates just like this 2, 2, which is the center space and is marked free, that we can use then to dictate exactly how we're going to stagger the motion. So it's not only giving us a location, but it's using that location to then stagger motion. And that's a really easy and effective way to create dynamic motion that also has its own pattern that you might find intuitive and hopefully pleasing to look at. So if we switch it to fly, then not all these properties might apply. I think they might in this case, but if I hover over, I can see what else I have access to or could have access to. So that gives me something pretty similar: delay, duration, easing, and then X and Y, so the direction that I want it to flow from, and opacity. So right now I have fly basically coming from nowhere. So I'm going to put in an X and a Y, and that's actually, I use fly for the modal, so you might have seen that. But let's just go ahead and put an X of, let's make it weird. Let's go ahead and do X times 50, and then Y is just going to be 350. I'm not sure what this is going to look like, so let's kind of check it out. And we still have our easing. Let's keep back in out. Yeah, and let's go with that. So we save, we'll let it reload, and create a new game. Yeah, so you could still kind of catch it there. Fly's got a little bit different effect, and if we switch it, we'll let that load. All right, so now we're trying slide. So I believe that's like sliding everything down, which is interesting. Let's try that one more time. Just gonna go here, here, here. So that's kind of a cool effect too. You know, it really depends, and theoretically you could just randomly choose which effect to run, and you know, that would be another opportunity. Hey all, I hope you enjoyed that little kind of basic overview of the way that you can use transitions in Svelte. Next time what I'm going to do is show a little bit more detail about something really cool that Svelte allows you to do with a crossfade function, which you can import from Svelte directly, and then allows you to pass in different parameters for how you want to handle your fallback, how you want to handle the fade between items, and this transition allows you to essentially provide motion that makes it seem like a component is moving to another component and being rendered there. So rather than a transition where it just disappears from, say, one list and goes to another, in this case I'm sending a card on the screen and the text on the card is then getting rendered, and I'm returning the card that was there previously. So it's really cool. Again, it's pretty much out of the box capability that you get with Svelte, or actually it really is out of the box capability. So the only thing that you need to do is figure out exactly how you want the transition to work, and then you can format your code based upon that. Again, for my use case, fairly straightforward, and I didn't change too much, and I'll give you a more in-depth detail about that in another video. Anyway, that's all for now. Have a good one.